It's a good morning, it's a good evening, it's a good night. We are live once again, Layer1Live, coming to you with a special episode today. It is a halving episode. So we're gonna cover all things, Bitcoin halving. We're gonna have a good time with it. We got the counter right down here for you guys. So hopefully you guys are having yourselves a good Monday. Layer1Live. We like coming to you on these Mondays a little bit later so that we could catch the festivities. But I am with two of my good friends. I got Mike up top. I got Dimitri right here below me. What's going on?
What's going on? What's going on? It's a big day. Once every 4 years, it's like the Bitcoin Olympics, man. Everybody's got fancy halving reports and predictions, and the day comes and then the day goes. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But otherwise, man, just same old. Still rocking and rolling over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how I've read some people saying, why would I celebrate the halving when my revenue gets cut in half? Speaking from the miners side. So some people have mixed opinions about the event, but this is my first one, and it's pretty exciting to see, obviously, the volatility in the market. So, and we obviously have some interesting pieces of news for you guys.
Yeah, we're pretty much going to be covering Bitcoin, Ethereum, and EOS today. It looks like Kieran's in the chat. Kieran, we're about to give you a shout out here in like 30 seconds, so just hold on, please. We got 25 minutes till the halving. Scott's in the chat. Appreciate you guys filling in. So we got a really good episode like Dimitri was talking about. Let's talk just a little bit before we get started on where you were the last halving. I believe it's my first halving as well. I got in like right afterwards. I don't know the halving date in 2016, but where were you, Mike, during this last halving?
Yeah, I think I had just left the brewery that I was working for, my brother's craft brewery at the time, and had started kind of just tinkering around a bit more with crypto. Sometime before that, I had moved any crypto that I had from Bitcoin to ETH. So I do the biggest memory of 16 was when ETH jumped like crazy, because I think that fall and winter, so like fall 2015, winter 2016, ETH was struggling a bit. It had just gone through the Dow hack a little while earlier. And price was pretty cheap. It was, anywhere from like 15 to $5. And if you look, you check out CoinMarketCap or whatnot, there's a little teeny tiny blip on the chart that shows the market cap going from 6 billion to 12 billion, which, if you look back, it's almost impossible to find. But at the time was obviously a massive jump, and, rolled into 17, and the rest is history as far as that kind of boom that everybody likes to look back on. So it was a good time.
Yeah, those are simpler times. Dimitri,
right.
What's your prediction here after halving, man? Or they caught me. After halving, what's the prediction here?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it on the desk, and you guys know my position. I've posted it on TradingView. So I think, overall, we're going to see some price appreciation for BTC, capitulation from some miners that are smaller, that will essentially cause this to dip in price. So, I'm still sitting on my short, man.
Yeah, I would expect nothing less from the Ukrainian bear there. Speaking of tops and bottoms, you actually called this last top of BTC. You put out Dimitri's desk, I believe, on Friday. It was like 5 p.m. around the same times that you do it mostly. And then we saw a big fat red candle pretty soon after that. What was the story behind that?
Yeah, I didn't expect it to come that quickly, and trust me, Dimitri's desk cannot manipulate the market at this point, so just keep that in mind. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, it's interesting that it worked out so quickly, and at the end of the day, as much as traders like to brag about calling the tops or bottoms and so on, at the end of the day, it's all theories that you're testing, right? So you have to keep that in mind. That it could have went the other way. Also, right? So therefore we have risk management in place and all these things. I just thought that this trade was hit very close into, like, kind of where everything was. And that's why I put out all of my thinking and my theory on there to have it recorded and show to everybody that here's my theory that I'm testing. And, you know, it looks like it's working out pretty good. And the trade is still open, right? Because the target for it is, you know, lower 7Ks. So it's still, you know, active. And, you know, so here we are. You know, I'm not going to say that, hey, I have a crystal ball. You know, I know exactly, you know, what was going to happen. But, you know, it's always good to see when things work out.
Yeah, man, we got some people in the Telegram group talking about it. The old public chat kind of joining and congratulating you on your calls. So we expect that paid group to launch any day now, fellas. Speaking, the last kind of like update here we have is we want to give a shout out to Kieran. He's one of our most loyal, you know, guys that's with us and been on the channel for a while. He put out a currency war synopsis almost based on Dimitri's recommendation. I think he bought it and literally read the book in like 2 days and got the synopsis. So we want to give a shout out to you, Kieran. That's pretty cool that you kind of bought the book on his recommendation and you know, read it and gave that synopsis. So that's pretty awesome. Keep a lookout, guys, in the Telegram group as well. Over I believe the next probably 8 hours, we're gonna drop some things in there. If you're in our like main Telegram, kind of invite only Telegram, we're gonna drop some things in there for you guys to take a look at. So that's pretty much it. Mike, did you have anything else before I get to these stats?
I don't think so, man. How was that caviar you were tweeting about, Dean? Like you got a fancy new bed and a can of caviar after
Right,
that?
yeah.
I thought that was a fake photo.
No, it is. Yeah.
Oh, 100% is.
All right.
Yeah, so that would be nice if that was the actual breakfast, but
That was the truth.
yeah.
Well, I mean, one day. We'll be there one day. All right, so I got the stats here. Top 5 countries, USA, got Australia, UK, Germany, and Canada. Top 3 episodes of the past week, or the episode with Florian Liss and staking facilities coming in at number 1, DeFi rate at number 2, and then props at number 3. So in that order that we recorded them, I believe. Upcoming guests, we got a full slate this month already locked in. So we got OpenSea, that decentralized kind of NFT marketplace on Ethereum. Status is going to be on the 15th, and then we got BlockFi coming in on 5/20. We're going to drop that episode, so that episode with Zach Prince will be a pretty good one. I think you guys are both taking that one, so that'll be fun. Other than that, man, I think we're ready to roll. I think we're about 19 minutes from Bitcoin halving, so we can roll into breaking. You guys can follow along if it's your first time. So you can see the column here. If you want specifically Bitcoin or EOS or Ethereum news, you can go to where that arrow is I guess, updating, because I usually do that on time. And you guys can, follow along with us. But other than that, let's go.
Yeah, let's hop into the breaking first. So, as you guys might be aware, Paul Tudor Jones, so hedge fund guy, billionaire, obviously came out a couple days ago saying that, hey, he bought some Bitcoin, and suddenly, the crypto world blew up, the Twitter blew up saying, hey, this guy's getting into Bitcoin. And then, obviously traditional media kind of picked it up, and they recently had him, well, today, I believe they had him on CNBC. And they were asking him questions about, hey man, what's up with this Bitcoin? How much did you buy? What's the reasoning behind it? And, he was explaining that since, before he didn't really think of Bitcoin as a tool, but now given the situation with COVID-19 and where we are economically in the world, and where fiat is, specifically, the US dollar, approaching, basically doing all things that will continue to inflate the dollar, and the dollar is essentially like a constantly depreciating asset. He is saying that, hey, Bitcoin is basically a hedge against that, and therefore he put in anywhere between, I think he said, between 1% to 2% of his assets into Bitcoin, which is interesting, to know, because if you look at his assets under management, do some math and so on, it's a pretty good amount there that he would put in into BTC, and he specifically put into BTC futures, which actually could explain why maybe we saw the CME open interest rise significantly recently. Maybe someone like him is getting in on Bitcoin to take a position. But you also have to keep in mind that he obviously has a portfolio that's balanced. So he obviously holds gold, he holds other things, and this 1 to 2% that he's using as a hedge, it's just part of many different things that he has, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that hey, listen, Bitcoin is gonna moon and you should 100x and so on, right? Because this guy, he tends to spread his risk around, and when things hit the fan, some of these hedges do perform and hedge out the risk in other assets that he holds. So it's something important to keep in mind. His basically, according to Forbes, his net worth is estimated at 5.1 billion. So this guy, he's got some cash.
To say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was definitely interesting to see someone like this getting in and publicly stating it, because honestly, like we know that these type of players usually, if they do get in, they don't like to be vocal about it, right? So and overall, I think the position for him is just he's just trying to emphasize how he's like against the dollar, and like how all these things that the government is doing, it's going to cause inflation and so on. So it plays along side of the rhetoric that he's trying to push onto the market. So
yeah, and I think it's funny when you kind of look at the context of folks like ourselves who maybe started with Bitcoin in a lot of cases in the financial markets, myself anyway. I saw a tweet or a quote from somebody the other day that said something along the lines of, every BTC buyer or investor is a secret macro investor, even if they don't know it yet. And I think PTJ coming in is a continuation of a trend of this institutional wave of sorts, or institutionalization of folks coming to crypto who are a bit more sophisticated, manage a significant amount of money, and likely what we will see, assuming this trend continues, is more and more of these macro type investors jumping in, right? Who kind of on the other side of the coin, you could say that these macro investors are BTC investors as well, or BTC fanatics as well, even if they don't know it yet. So it'll be interesting as we look past the halving here. I don't know how close we are at this point, but we're definitely getting up on that number. It looks like about 15 minutes. As more and more folks start to come to Bitcoin, if you have somebody like a Paul Tudor Jones to basically say, well, this guy knows what he's doing, he's in, so I'm not the first one through the door. Maybe it makes it a little bit easier for some of these other macro institutional investor types to jump in.
Yeah, he had a lot of good quotes too. He was pretty eloquent, or at least breaking down kind of the complex processes or the complex thesis of Bitcoin into like very digestible words for people trying to get in. So yeah, big moment there for Bitcoin. I feel like maybe just it's going to get overlooked in a month when we kind of forget about this, but that was, I feel like, a big moment for Bitcoin long term. So I want to shout out to guys in the chat again. We had Kieran, we had Scott. Kieran said it was 5 days, and that's something I do fairly often. I have a reading list that updates on Twitter. So I guess Kieran's an avid reader here. We got Scott calling for a BTC pump. Meta's in the chat. He says, hi, Sutlerites, throwing out the throwback. And he also says, this is my first BTC halving event. Pretty exciting. So we got about 13 minutes, 30 seconds left until the halving. We'll see if that varies as we get down close to it. But I don't know. I don't even have the queued up crowd applause or alarm bell for Mike, but we'll figure out something. So we got about 12 in the chat. Welcome in, guys. Hopefully you're having a good Monday. But let's get on to quick news.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get rolling. So the first piece of news, actually, I have the first 3 pieces of news. And the first one is, thank you. Bitfinex now offering derivative contract on BTC dominance. So guys, for those that are looking to trade some other things besides Bitcoin, you can now trade, basically the Bitcoin dominance. If you watch Dimitri's desk, we cover BTC dominance against alt market cap all the time, so you guys know kind of what it is. And Bitfinex is introducing that product, which essentially, it's less volatile than the actual BTC, and they talk about all these kind of things that you can get exposure to BTC with less volatility and so on. But, you know, at the end of the day, obviously they want to create products that will push volume, and that's exactly what they're doing. So, you know, especially coming up on an event like this, which can result in some volatility, you know, a product like this could, you know, definitely make some extra cash for Bitfinex if, you know, if they're pushing quite a bit of volume through that. So just another product created by Bitfinex. You can trade. I don't know who trades on Bitfinex. I personally, you know, do not, obviously. But for those that do, you know, you'll have access to that. Moving right along to some research paper came out basically saying 98% of XRP transactions are empty. Wow, shocker. Did not expect this one. But you know, yeah, basically it's saying that XRP blockchain is seeing these transactions with zero value. And aside even from just XRP, they also mentioned two others, which is EOS and Tezos, where basically they're saying, hey, there's a lot of transactions happening on these networks that have no value, and the reason why they don't, because, you know, there's certain airdrops that are happening on these networks that for tokens that still have you know, don't have any value there, and then also there's also spamming going on just because like you mentioned, you know, some of these networks have you know, extremely low fees when it comes to making transactions. So therefore, you know, you can spam transactions you know, basically with no value per se, you know. So you know, obviously it's not good. You know, I wouldn't really put, you know, XRP in the same boat as EOS and Tezos, to be honest. You know, so I'll take that research paper with a grain of salt. But it is interesting to know, obviously, that, you know, some of these transactions that we see, you know, might not have value and whatnot. So
Yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter actually posting some on-chain data about Ethereum's users' like willingness to pay transactions, and whether that's like a bullish case for Ethereum, because you see all these people that are willing to pay a certain amount of price for pushing transactions through. Now that seems like super ETH kind of centric, because no one's really paying for EOS transactions, right? You're staking your EOS and then having feeless transactions, so it's a little bit different. But it is good to see, you know. That I guess on-chain data is being taken seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Q defending his bags.
So there's an undercurrent here where you guys are thinking I'm like shilling on Layer1Live. All right, go ahead.
All right, so yeah, in the last piece of news for me, the open interest for BTC options broke 1 billion the first time ever. We've covered that on Desk on Friday. I specifically talked about, you know, the put to call ratio that was there, that was rising. As a matter of fact, let me take a look at it, what it's at right now. It's actually 0.75 put to call ratio.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, we came down a little bit because it was at 0.81, but 0.75 is today. So it's still kind of in that bearish territory where, you know, there's a lot of puts that have been bought than calls as far as the open interest is, because back in March, that ratio was 0.43. So that was pretty significant. Obviously, you know, when we look at pieces of data like that, we're going to see, you know, volume and open interest, and that's exactly what we're getting. So the more volume and open interest we have, the more we can rely on data like put to call ratios and so on to kind of give us a sentiment in the options market. And then the CME open interest just in general, Bitcoin futures hit all-time high, and like I mentioned, you know, maybe, you know, like somebody big is getting in, like Paul, maybe on these CME futures. Obviously, Paul is not going to be trading with BitMEX. Let's be honest. So I think, you know, that's pretty good. The CME open interest reached that all-time high for Bitcoin, because, you know, technically you would say that, you know, institutional traders are the ones that, you know, only work with regulated entities would be using CME Bitcoin futures, and we're seeing that open interest continues to rise.
Got it. Beautiful. Well, I got 3 pieces of quick news here. A little update on Telegram. kind of indirectly, I guess, but there is officially a fork of Telegram. This is coming out being called Free Ton, TON in all capital letters there. I imagine it stands for that Telegram Open Network that we've talked about before. But this comes obviously after the announcement about Telegram postponing their original Ton platform in response to all of the regulatory issues that they've had in the US. So this has been put together by some quote unquote community devs and validators. They came out with something that they're calling the Declaration of Decentralization, where they're going to have a Telegram-like open network. And obviously it will go live before Telegram's own in-house network goes live, if it ever does. So they're going to have some tokens called, I think, Ton Crystals. They're not available yet. Basically, the new network is still in beta. But after they go through some testing, I believe there's 2 full testing phases. And once they reach a level of decentralization that they're comfortable with, they will open it up to everybody else. So, Telegram lives on one way or another, this time just via a fork.
Mike, I got something before you start this. Crypto Pickle's in the chat. If you don't remember Crypto Pickle, that doesn't remind you of something. I sent a Telegram message to the Pikeys chat. I think he was the one talking shit about your Penguins jersey. You got anything to say? Maybe he's a Caps fan. Who knows?
Yeah, well, season's canceled as far as I know. So some time to wait. We got about 6 minutes here until the halving. It's coming right up. I'm going to hit these 2 pieces of news here. Interesting Bitcoin stats that we've seen. So 3 different stats. As the kind of hype around Bitcoin has grown, it's strange, but Bitcoin nodes have fallen to their lowest level in 3 years. So these are full nodes. These aren't miners. These are nodes that just basically store the blockchain and run as these full nodes. It's like I said, it's at that 3-year low. There's still tens of thousands of them out there, so it's not any sort of kind of massive detriment to the network. But the argument kind of goes round and round about, hey, how many full nodes do we need in existence for Bitcoin to be, considered decentralized and secure and all these various things. The second piece of data here is one that we've all, kind of always known, but news.bitcoin.com talks a bit about it again. Now with 65% of Bitcoin's global hash rate being concentrated in China, I think likely with Black Thursday and the events we saw on March 12th, you saw a lot of maybe smaller non-Chinese Bitcoin miners drop out, and some of these larger pools or larger Chinese miners take control. So we'll see what happens after the halving here. But with 65% of hash rate already in China, that kind of loops in on the discussion around security and decentralization that we've seen time and time again. And then finally, Grayscale and Square, it came out that they had, strangely enough, consumed over 50% of Bitcoin mined in Q1 of this year. So unbelievable amount of Bitcoin that has flown through Grayscale via their institutional platform that's actively traded, the GBTC trust, essentially. And then obviously Square, with more of a focus on your retail buyer crowd, somebody who maybe sends cash via the Square Cash app, are now buying Bitcoin and potentially sending that Bitcoin there. Square is absolutely blown up and is one of the most important companies in crypto right now, up there with Coinbase and some of these others as far as on-ramps go. So some kind of positive and negative news there on Bitcoin. If we flip the tables a little bit here on the permissioned blockchain side, things continue to kind of boom over there, definitely behind the scenes. But via an article on Forbes, there's a blockchain called the Axcore Blockchain, which has decided to and successfully made a deal essentially with a giant options clearinghouse. It's called the OCC, or Options Clearing Corporation, that NASDAQ launched. And they're going to be essentially putting $72 billion worth of equities that are on loan all across the Americas on this Axcore blockchain. So this, as we've heard time and time again, will cut out a lot of middlemen. Essentially, every party who's putting those loans on the blockchain will act as a node, and it's as far as kind of a permissioned or private blockchain goes, it's a huge win for the Axcore blockchain folks. So if you're interested in the permission side of things and what's going on there, this kind of tokenization of equities is coming to fruition.
Gotcha. Those are good pieces of news there, guys. We're coming up to it. It says about 2 minutes. Obviously, that varies. We don't know exactly when, unless we keep refreshing some type of Bitcoin blockchain explorer, and we can check it out. I do want to give some shout outs to the people in the chat here. Crypto Pickle did join. Shun's in the house. Shun, what's going on, man? He says greetings from Taiwan. I think it's about 3 a.m. there, so we appreciate you tuning in for this halving event. We got, who else in the chat here? We got 1-2 in the chat saying what's up. So, guys, we got about 1:30. I don't know how we want to actually confirm that this halving took place. If we want to get a refreshing from your end, Mike, and see when those blocks are mined. Until then, I got 3 pieces of news here that I'll go over really quickly. A little bit of news from Joseph Lubin. I guess this is from the Ethereum Summit. He's talking about creating a platform for token creations. So I guess the platform is called Codify Activate. And they're going to be focusing on launching tokens. And I guess the conversation's really around launching, and he used in quote unquote, clean utility tokens. We obviously saw within the ICO days that people were launching utilities that were, classified as securities. So can you guys hear me? Ooh, you guys hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
Yeah, you're a little laggy, but it's coming through.
Yeah, it says the internet connection's unstable. So, but basically, Lubin's going to be focusing on 3 things, and that is those token creations of new clean utility tokens that are within the SEC's rules, as well as he's looking at staking as a service, and he's also looking at DeFi applications. The article goes on to explain that they're looking at structural changes within consensus, but that seems to be pretty standard news at this point within consensus. So we'll see where they go from here, but he's definitely looking at staking as well as creating a platform for creating utility tokens. So interesting stuff there. We have Lolli raising $3 million in new funding. Obviously, people know for the most part what Lolli is, but it offers Bitcoin rebates essentially on purchases at large chains as well as smaller stores and things like that. So we had a $3 million funding round led by Founders Fund as well as Sound Ventures and Bain Capital. It looks like Lolli raised 2.25 back in November of 2018. So that brings their total raise up to 5.25 million. So we did have Alex on the podcast, Alex Adelman, the founder and CEO of Lolli, and that was a good conversation. So it's good to see them raising little funds, continuing that runway if they do at this point need it. There wasn't any stats on revenue or anything like that for Lolli, but it's good to see them raising. And the last bit of news, interfering with Q's internet. The last bit of news is just a kind of DeFi piece of news here. There's more Bitcoin locked into the Ethereum network with wrapped Bitcoin than there is on the Lightning network. So I think there's 1,300 BTC tokens that are locked in Ethereum, and at this point, when I'm bringing you this information, there's about 875 BTC on the Lightning network. So it looks like Ethereum users, or it could be Bitcoin users that are looking to get some Ethereum exposure, but it looks like people are interested in DeFi and in this wrapped Bitcoin that's essentially an ERC20 token pegged to the price of Bitcoin. So good to see there. Obviously, Ethereum's we've been talking about it ad nauseum, I think, for the past month, 2-3 months. But there are users on Ethereum, and they're looking to, use these financial, applications, and WBTC, wrapped BTC is part of it. So there is more wrapped BTC locked than there is more Bitcoin locked on the Ethereum network than there is on Lightning. Boom. Did we hit it, Mike?
Boom. Not quite yet. I think we have just about a block and a half to go.
I like it. There's a negative 1 minute left.
Bitcoin halving can go negative.
Yeah, exactly.
But Yeah, it should be hitting anywhere and anytime here we're at block height 629,998. So once we get to 630 here in about 13 minutes or so, assuming block times are at 10 minutes still, we will have hit the halving. But I can run into some interesting news on Ethereum. The news just kind of keeps rolling, and we can start the discussion here if you guys want.
Let's do it. Yeah, sorry about the connection,
Awesome.
guys.
Yeah, not sure what the issue is there. We're kind of working through it here, but ETH 2.0 is rocking and rolling. So we talked previously about July, kind of Q3 timeframe being that phase 0 of ETH 2.0, where we would start to get some staking rewards being possible. We got some more information on how that's going to work. Vitalik and other senior ETH developers have said that July is still on pace. They are, working for that goal. So, if we haven't gotten a delay by beginning of June, I think we're probably on pace to hit that. But there has been some more information coming out about how you can earn on ETH 2.0, specifically as that Genesis block happens. Believe it or not, the staking rate will be as high as 20.3%. This is just an initial kind of Genesis focused staking rate in order to incentivize people to stake their ETH, because as is the case with other networks, I know EOS did this whenever they launched their main net, but you have to basically stake a certain amount of ETH before the proof of stake will kind of officially get going. So at 5 million ETH, that's the first goal. That drops that staking percentage down to 6.6%. So understanding how much ETH is out there, understanding kind of the players who are sitting heavy, the miners, whoever it may be, I think we probably get to 5 million ETH staked pretty quickly, if not even within that first 24 hours. But if you want to, grab some extra APR there and try and get a few hours or so at that 20.3% rate, you'll need to be one of the first people to stake. Obviously that, comes with risk. A lot of the ETH developers are talking about how once phase 0 of ETH 2.0 starts, they do expect another kind of anywhere from 12 to 24 months before sharding begins, which is that phase 1, which is obviously going to do some really good things for scaling with ETH. Now, they even went so far as to basically say that the sharding will basically allow the capacity of each block to jump to 500 kilobytes. This is, I'll read it right here. It says, this involves implementing sharding and creating 64 shards with a data capacity of 500 kilobytes each, which, as far as blocks go right now on the current Ethereum chain, you're only getting 25 kilobytes. So this is a pretty serious jump as far as block capacity goes, and obviously one that the Ethereum community is looking forward to. So it looks like, to start, it's going to be a pretty high staking rate that's going to drop down essentially as more stakers go. They don't give a fixed rate on the staking, obviously, because a lot of it is going to depend on how much is staked and how much you have as a staker. But I think it's probably safe to assume a rate somewhere between 2 and 4%, just out of that pure proof of stake model with ETH.
Hugh, want to go first?
No, I mean, so what's the discussion here? That it's going to launch on time, about the APR? I mean, I would probably guess whatever Vitalik's saying right now when it's going to launch, which is Q3, that it's going to get pushed back a little bit. I even think in that Masari article there, they were talking about timelines and whether that roadmap is correct. So the chances it launches in Q3, I think, are relatively low. I think whenever Vitalik's come out and talked about ETH 2.0, although we're getting up to it, I still think that they're a little bit behind the ball as far as launching things on time. So I think that percentage of staking, it's not like a new network, right? So you are going to see that percentage of staking just boom shoot up right to the top. So you are going to have like a small amount of time to get those staking rewards that supposedly gets people to incentivized to stake on the network. So I would agree with pretty much everything you said. I think that the roadmap though is looking probably more like 2021, and that's just my guess, right? This is just like sheets to the wind. I don't really know exactly when it's going to launch, but my guess is it's going to get pushed back and we see it in 2021. It's just better for ETH in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that would be a ETH taking an L if we saw 2021 as phase 0. Did we just hit the halving here?
Yeah,
we did.
Boom.
Awesome.
Where were you? Congrats, guys. Bitcoin halving, Layer1Live. Everybody that's following along, thank you for being here with us. Big moment, man. Big moment. I'm gonna keep this halving countdown. We're at -8 minutes. We're just gonna leave it up there the rest of the way. But appreciate everybody celebrating the halving with us, man. It's been a ride.
We got to restart the ticker for 2024 now. See how many minutes we have until the next halving. But yeah, as far as ETH goes, right? Q3. I think even if we see a delay from July all the way until say September, right? They could still hit Q3, which with crypto projects, it tends to be that, like you said, when you say a Q1, it's either at the end of Q1 or sometime mid Q2. So we'll see. Where obviously keep you guys posted on ETH there. It's arguably the largest development in crypto, specifically from a development standpoint that I think is happening over the next 1 to 2 years. You've always got brand new ETH competitors coming out, and a handful of projects are building and investing in things. And obviously you've got the Bitcoin halving, but purely from a development standpoint, I think ETH is really going to continue to kind of steal the limelight from a lot of others.
Yep, we got Dimitri. You got anything there?
Yeah, I was gonna just say that in general, I think Vitalik has been somewhat good at managing expectations in terms of when the ETH 2.0 is gonna come out. So for them to say that it's gonna come out here fairly soon is quite promising, considering that if that's in fact the case, they see everything is kind of at the end of the roadmap when it comes to release. And obviously post the release, that's when it's going to be the other half of the work that will need to be done, right? To patch up all these things that, all these bugs that might occur, because we know that, hey, you can make it perfect, but once you release it to the market, there'll still be holes that will be found, and you have to battle test it. So, kind of sitting in the back and trying to work it out and make it perfect, delaying it might not necessarily be as productive as releasing it, and then, kind of fixing things up a little bit as we go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we got people in the chat here. I wanted to shout out as we go, as we kind of hit that halving countdown in Block was mined. Meta's saying halving is interfering with Q's internet. We got Trader saying win okay. He
win 0K.
Oh, win 0K. Okay. Rewards haven't ? Win price haven't. We had people saying it mined fireworks. Sir, the Halfini has happened. We got 1-2 saying Ethereum 2.0 coming soon, 2025. We got Shun with the thumbs up. Sonata's saying Bitcoin is dead. So we got about 20. I think we maxed out at 22 guys here in the chat. So we appreciate you guys following along. Vlad saying, what does contracts looking like for dealers? I'm sure that's a question.
Deem.
Yeah, that's the Deem. Before you get to that, Deem, it looks like Florian's in the chat, man. So Florian from Staking Facilities, who we had on the episode, he is in the chat. It's good to see you. One of the things Florian said about the switch to Ethereum 2.0, Mike, was that there's a manual process that needs to happen with tokens to transfer your ERC20 tokens to the actual new staking network. I tweeted about that. I saw you liked it. What do you think about that process? How many people do you think that are holding ETH know that they're going to have a manual process to actually switch their tokens to the new staking network?
Yeah, I think it's more of a potential issue with the various entities and kind of niches that exist within ETH than it is an individual token holder. So if you just look at the stablecoin ecosystem, right? What processes are going to happen as that industry has crossed 10 billion now and is largely, just as valuable, if not more valuable than ETH itself, right? I mean, this thing operates 24/7, tons of volume, multiple different stable coins, and that's just one piece, right? Then you look at NFTs and you look at, some of the other, token standards, right? Your various ERC20s that have all, your kind of little details and niches there. Your security tokens, which I think are the 777s. So it's a lot, right? It's going to be a very slow process. It's going to be very gradual. I think there, just inevitably are going to be issues, but it's a matter of, filling those holes very quickly. And I think the ETH community working together so that as they move into phase 0 here, hopefully soon, and then try to get to phase 1, which is really going to be the giant task in this whole launch. I think as long as there's not some giant issue, some giant kind of DAO hack thing, that it will get through. It's just going to take some time.
Got it. Dimitri, did you want to comment? What do contracts looking like for dealers?
Yeah, Vlad. So we get the commitment of traders report every Friday. So the last report that we got last Friday, they were short, obviously. So comes this Friday, we'll have an update on that. So tune in.
Got it. You're up, Dimitri. Let's hit it.
Oh, let's go. Yeah. So guys, Libra, you remember that? Some news are coming out for Libra. They hired a former HSBC head, basically. Just a second, load this up. All right. So the Libra Association announced that they hired Stuart Levy as its first CEO. And this person is the chief legal officer of HSBC. It's actually, currently the legal officer of HSBC. And, it kind of shows you that Libra is picking up some of these big, big guys to run their project and, and overall show to the world, like kind of the right message, because the CEO is kind of, delivering that. And, this person actually also served under the Secretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence during the Bush and Obama administration. When I first saw this, I can't help to kind of not bring up and not remember when HSBC bank was, kind of hitting some money laundering issues. Back in the day, I believe it was like 2012, where they ended up settling for like 1.9 billion, where there was a whole thing about HSBC and money laundering for like I think it was like the cartel, like Latin America or something like that. So it's interesting to see that this person from HSBC. Now HSBC obviously is different, in terms of operations and everything, but they do have some interesting past. So with that being said, for Libra, it's something actually reminds me of what Karen was asking in chat also about, how do you preserve like the purchasing power given the global situation right now with fiat and the projection for inflation for the dollar and so on, all these things that are happening globally. And what Libra is doing is basically making a basket of currencies, right? So we have kind of an index of currencies in there that are weighted, and you can use that as as a kind of like a hedge for purchasing value when you are exposed to a basket of different currencies rather than just to a single one. And it's, obviously gonna have like, certain factors of transparency or whatnot when it comes to transacting with those baskets in regards to like buying and selling them. But, overall, the timing for Libra, could not be better, because at the moment, the way the Federal Reserve in US is behaving in regards to printing, more, and that inflation gets extracted to other countries, most of it for now at least. And we're hitting deflationary times initially for the dollar. A lot of other economies are starting to think of the way US is scaring themselves as really flexing their special abilities of being the global reserve currency, right? So I think having a basket of currencies will kind of undermine the global reserve currency being a single currency. Libra overall is looking to capitalize on the basket of currencies that will kind of, take a basket of countries and all the things that are happening in those countries, like manufacturing, production, the growing economies, and so on. That gives you a better exposure for the future in regards to preserving, the purchasing power, and maybe starting to slowly deviate from having the dollar as the reserve currency. Obviously, that process, I think, will take many years, but this is also the reason why we're seeing a lot of things in regards to the U.S. government asking questions about Libra and grilling them on many different questions because it's kind of putting that attack, possible attack on the dollar should this gain in popularity around the world. So what do you guys think about now? Obviously, this person getting in. And coming from a very big bank, right, that has some past that's questionable, is now starting to get into this Libra as the CEO, and they this person, I wouldn't say this person has like a shady past. This person actually has worked for administrations to control like terrorism and all those things. So it's actually like what regulators want to see when it comes to money laundering and prevention of that. So what do you guys think of these bankers are getting into Libra?
Yeah, I want to add one thing before we have this discussion as well, because Crypto Pickle kind of had this discussion or this question, which kind of revolves around this discussion that we're about to have, is who the hell is going to use Libra when you can use literally anything else? That was quote unquote what he's using. So I'll let Mike get to it, but I have my own thoughts on that statement there. But Mike, in response to Dima's question there about Libra hiring this HSBC head, what do you think?
Yeah, just as some added context, right? So Libra and Facebook are trying to go about this in a quote unquote decentralized way. So you have the various members, right? They had Visa and all these various members, which now if you look on the website, it's a much different list. It's mostly venture firms. You've got some crypto firms in there like Coinbase, Anchorage. You have some bigger names like Shopify, Spotify, Uber, Lyft, right? But it's a significantly kind of less pronounced member group where the members' goal is to act basically as kind of the governing body for Libra. So every member will be able to have one representative to the Libra Association. So this association is kind of governed by all of those various members or all of those various representatives from each individual member. 20 members, you got 20 representatives. They make up the council. But alongside the council, there's a handful of different groups too. One is the executive team, which is where the CEO falls into now. I think it makes sense that they would take someone who is a legal officer and plug them in at the CEO role, because that is really going to be the most important thing that Libra tackles in regulatory hurdles. If they can't figure that out and they can't get off the ground, it's going to be very difficult for them to really get anything going. And the longer that lasts, the more people are going to pull out. So they've got the executive team. They also then have a board of directors, which includes the CEO of Zappo, also includes David Marcus, who we've heard a lot about, right? So David Marcus is heading up Calibra, which is the front end version of Libra, where the various single fiat based stable coins will exist. That's something Libra has pivoted to as of recent. Instead of kind of combining them all into one stable coin, they'll have various single fiat backed stable coins, whether they include gold with one of them or any other sort of kind of commodity. We'll have to see, but it sounds like they're just looking to launch their own stable coin. And then finally you have what they call like a technical steering committee. which is obviously going to be focused on the tech of it. So you have, your members, which make up the association. You got the executive team who heads up everything as far as these members go and partnerships, some board of directors to make sure they're on pace, and then a tech group to make sure the tech is there and in line. On that question, I mean, no one's really using anything that's digital, that's cryptographic in any way yet. So I think Libra has a significant advantage over other stable coins, over Bitcoin, over any other crypto asset, because it can deploy this to millions, if not billions of users immediately, right? If you look at Shopify, you look at Uber, Lyft, Facebook, and you're giving somebody a much easier way to pay or receive money that's directly connected to their bank account without them having to go through a PayPal or having to go through Visa checkout or anything like this. It becomes a lot more powerful for those businesses that are interacting with users in a very direct way. So, I think a lot of people have kind of thrown Libra under the bus because of the regulatory hurdles they've had, but I think it could be, one of the bigger events that happens on the digital money side.
If it wasn't associated with Zuckerberg and Libra or Zuckerberg and Facebook, and it was associated with maybe like Jack Dorsey and Twitter, I wonder how much more people would be behind this project. I think the question like that really has to go into Libra is whether these countries, these various like emerging market countries, third world countries where they're not using USD on a day-to-day basis, like pretty much everywhere else, but mainly those third world countries and in those emerging markets, it's like, will the government be okay with allowing their citizens to actually try and buy this? Like, if you can get there, then why not use Libra? And then you have the whole thing with Facebook having Web 2 applications that are in front of people all the time. The billions of people use Facebook. And so if you maybe make a plugin or you make some type of, application that works with Facebook where you can now access Facebook and a Facebook wallet, aka Libra, then you have a situation where, okay, it's in front. So certainly someone else could do this, but no one else is. And Facebook's there for this person, right? So I think Dimitri brings this up all the time, but it's more about the governments in these countries actually allowing Libra to take place and not coming down hard on regulation. Because if it does, then why wouldn't a citizen want a currency not backed by whatever government that they live under, but a basket of many governments or a basket of many currencies that have various governments involved?
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes one of two ways. Maybe it happens simultaneously, but I think Libra could be good for Bitcoin in that it introduces folks to the concept of digital currency. Obviously, most transactions that any normal person is participating in are done via credit, so they're done digitally already, or debit. Right? It's cash is dying out. It's kind of an old man's game anymore. I think everybody would agree with that. So if Libra can kind of further show people like, hey, you've been using digital money, right? Here's a really easy option that's going to cut out all these middlemen so you don't have to pay these fees. And oh, by the way, if you want to get even, kind of crazier down the rabbit hole, there's this thing called Bitcoin, which is decentralized. It's not run by any government. It's not tied to any kind of fiat currency. It's the currency of the internet. It's digital gold, whatever the shtick is there. I think that's one route. And the other route, kind of along what you were saying, Q, is that if Libra comes out and can convince a lot of these governments that their various stablecoin for that individual government. So if it's, let's say it's Germany, right? And they say, hey, listen, like you're having these issues with the euro, everybody wants the dollar, but with Libra, we're going to be able to kind of, reinvigorate the use of the euro in Germany or digitally or something like this, right? And we're going to work with all these various banks and all these businesses, and it's going to help you in some way. Same with the British pound in Great Britain. And if they can pull that off, then I think it becomes, it actually could hurt Bitcoin in a lot of ways, because now you're kind of doubling down on fiat by taking some of the digital components of a Bitcoin and just, making it a lot easier for folks to transact in dollar or euro or whatnot.
That will likely happen anyways, though, because you have
Right.
the digitization of each of those countries' currencies. But that's a fair point. We have a lot of naming mechanisms here, or naming. I guess we have a naming election going on in our chat. I guess, sir, if you were to name a wallet, what would it be called? Kieran's throwing out Calibra is actually a weak name when it comes to a wallet. So that front end name. So we got a couple. We got Ledger, which is obviously already taken. We got Kieran. We got Pickle Wallet. We've got Picklet. So we're getting pretty close to renaming Calibra here. Big things on Layer1Live.
This is revolutionary stuff we got going on in the chat here.
Anything else on Libra, Dimitri? I know some of the stuff that I talked. Go ahead.
Yeah, what you mentioned, is some of the things that I discussed. And the interesting stuff that might happen, I just thought of, is that, let's say these international companies like Uber or whatnot, they're working in countries, operating in countries where they collect revenue in the local currency. And perhaps in the back end, it would be interesting to see how in the back end international settlements are going to be done, maybe using or hedging through Libra to use the local currency and make that process better. So right now we know that international settlements and all operating in different countries and transferring funds, it's kind of sluggish, and there's a lot of fees, a lot of middlemen involved. So with Libra in place, that could open up some options for them to use in other countries on an enterprise level, right? So something that maybe the people won't be allowed, but the company itself will be like, all right, we're using it for international settlements, and here it is. That's how it's going to go. But the users themselves, are not going to have exposure to it. That's a possibility, for that as well. I think in that scenario, the interesting part is going to be see if they're going to ever rebalance that basket based on things that are going on, with those different economies that are tied to those currencies. You
got to remember too that I think they came out and said that they're going to abandon the basket and they're just going to focus on individual stable coins.
So what do you mean, like in the individual country? Gotcha. Okay. Well,
right.
I mean, you can make, that opens up, an option to make your own basket then basically, so, I mean, that's pretty much, the theories that I have on Libra.
Interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think we got a winner here in the chat. We have it. Florian says we should call the wallet empty. So ding, 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 Florian, you got the, you got to put that together. Get us on the phone. Our people call your people, and we'll put empty wallet together. All right.
Sure.
So let's head into Bitcoin here, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting thing on the institutional front again. This really is starting to feel like a trend that is slowly continuing. It's not happening in the US, but it is happening, just across the border in Canada. There's a new Bitcoin exchange traded product, which if you read this article on Forbes, it's hilarious because the first part of it talks all about how this new exchange traded product very blatantly says we are not marketing to US investors. This is not for US investors, but goes on to really talk about how this could still be a way in for some of these U.S. investors who have not been able to obviously get a Bitcoin ETF to date. In this being created on the Toronto Stock Exchange, you have ARK Invest, Van Eck, and Doyle Capital, who the first two for sure. I'm not familiar with Doyle Capital, but ARK Invest and Van Eck have obviously been super focused on launching a Bitcoin ETF. Their most recent one was denied, and their response to the SEC was basically like, you guys don't want this at all. We've listened to everything that you asked us to do, and you're still denying us. So maybe this is their way of kind of getting around some of that regulation because, while this is not registered and regulated in the US, it can still be bought from folks like Fidelity, Interactive Broker. So I don't know exactly how that ETP or ETF structure works, right? Can regulated investors that are based in the US go to a Fidelity, go to an Interactive Brokers and buy this, this product, or do they still have to wait for that registered product? But overall, like I said, I mean, this feels whether it's this little piece of news that kind of slipped by, or it's the giant Paul Tudor Jones, it feels more and more like this kind of wave of institutions is continuing, even with the chaos on March 12th and the obvious price decline there. Folks are seeing the potential for Bitcoin, and whether it's kind of a third-party service or a fund of some kind or an ETP, they're either taking direct investment in some way or making sure that the various picks and shovels, if you will, are ready in case this really takes off and hits mainstream with more retail folks and obviously more institutional folks. So big news potentially there out of Canada.
Yeah, Mike's been talking about the institutionalization of crypto for like the past, year and a half, maybe even 2 years. So it's good to see. Actually, no, even back at the ICO days, I think you were kind of making some rumblings about it. So it's good to see kind of things starting to gain traction. I know it's kind of a big wheel that grinds slowly. So it's good to see. Hopefully this stuff starts to pick up and the SEC starts to get their shit together. But who knows?
Yeah. I think it's got to happen, really, if Bitcoin's going to continue in any kind of strong, less volatile way. I think you've got to start to really have institutions come in and embrace this. I mean, obviously, you've got leaders like a Fidelity or leaders on the business side, like even Facebook, if you would, with Libra and Calibra, Jack Dorsey, like you said, at Twitter, right? There's some major figureheads, but we need that to continue, really, I think, for the proper liquidity to exist and counterparties to kind of come in and really turn this into what it can be.
I was gonna touch on that point of liquidity. You have to have institutional people in the game. You have to be able to work with banks when it comes to our industry in order to have liquidity for BTC. And so we don't have like these Black Thursday events where liquidity just dries up and BTC just crashes like crazy. So in general, more liquidity, more institutional players in the game is actually better for the overall ecosystem. And then ETFs, obviously, you have players that see how much money can be made on the spreads and are being BTC. So these institutional traders are hopping into to basically take that bounty. And on the other hand, they're providing tools like providing more liquidity and products for people to use that are regulated to gain exposure to Bitcoin. So it's definitely a very interesting piece of news, and Canada is paving the way before US, man.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to point out too, Florian, we had that episode with him last week, and we kind of got into a discussion about crypto in Germany, and he was saying that for the most part, in general, that the German government has been fairly open to the idea of cryptocurrencies. Blockchain infrastructure being built out at enterprises within Germany is like obviously picking up and has been there for a while, at least for the conversation that we had with him. So that's pretty cool to see. I'm interested to see how Germany evolves with crypto and blockchain. I think they could be, if they're not already a huge player, which they are. Like I look to Germany kind of as kind of a flag bearer of sorts in the Western world as far as blockchain and crypto go. So
nice. So looks like Bitcoin is back at 8,700 post the halving. So moon soon.
I gotta get the price chart back up here, fellas. 8,700. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
What was the low?
You mean today?
What was the low? Was it 8,100 that we hit?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, 81, 81.15. Low today is about 82. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of we got a doji on the weekly in place right now. What happens?
Anyway, moving right along. So next piece of news for Bitcoin is Iran. So Iran is making headlines. There's a company called iMiner, a Turkey-based company, and they've landed basically a license from Iran to be able to set up their mining rigs in Iran. There's about 6,000 mining rigs that they're looking to set up in the city of Semnan. I can't pronounce Semnan, I guess. That's the city. But
You saying cinnamon?
yeah, cinnamon. Yeah. The company basically spent 7.3 million to set up these rigs in Iran after they got the green light from the regulators in Iran. And just in general, Iran has been like kind of against the cryptocurrency, right? For some time, we've seen that. But hey, when the US started putting on these sanctions and all these things, they started to open up to cryptocurrency a little bit more. And they're doing a bunch of creative stuff there with their fiat currency because they're hitting hyperinflation. So it's kind of like Iran is trying to use as many tools as possible to kind of prevent disaster in their fiat, and maybe allowing Bitcoin is maybe mining Bitcoin maybe something that could push the growth of their kind of economy and so on. I'm not sure what kind of contract they have with this company in regards to taxes and so on. How much of that of revenue that's going to be generated is going to be shared with the local government. But what it also does is something we love to talk about. Q is the on-ramp, right, for the people, because once you have the mining of Bitcoin, then you have cryptocurrency and custody. That's also what they explained in this article, is that that's going to be available as well, so people can be on board and do and custody their digital gold, if you will, in Iran. So it's interesting stuff, because we keep on getting these news from about local Bitcoin, where in Iran people are buying BTC at a huge premium. And now we're actually getting some rails in place that will open up the trading ability for Iranian people that is more fair, in regards to where the market price is right now, and they'll probably save some money on the premiums there. And for them, miners, obviously Iran is subsidizing, and they have quite a bit of resources for the energy generation, right? So iMiners are getting a pretty good deal when it comes to the money that they spend on electricity to be able to mine.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I guess this first occurred back in July of last year. Basically the government has handed out somewhere around 1,000 of these licenses to various local operations. So they seem to be kind of moving forward pretty heavily towards crypto and Bitcoin. Obviously, the biggest theory is the sanctions, but also at the same time, it's worth noting that their currency has been going through hyperinflation. Their real, as of I think it was last Monday, basically the monetary and banking act of Iran was kind of adjusted in a way to offer a brand new currency called the Toman, which is worth 10,000 reals. So, perhaps the growth of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in Iran was a way for the government itself to hedge some of the issues that they thought might happen with hyperinflation that we see happening now. My biggest question or kind of fear with this is that if you look at a lot of the countries that are dealing with hyperinflation, like in Iran, I think like Lebanon maybe is another one, but there's a handful in the Middle East that aren't the best friends of the U.S. and of other major governments across the world. So I guess my question to you guys would be, what's the risk that Iran comes out alongside of China or a Russia or a handful of other countries that the U.S. and Europe are not necessarily best friends with, and we run into a scenario where Bitcoin and your crypto assets are kind of pegged to some of these countries the U.S. doesn't like? Is there any risk in your guys' mind that we kind of see a friend of my enemy is an enemy of mine when it comes to Bitcoin seeing adoption in some of these less U.S. or Europe friendly countries?
Yeah. So I just want to mention that Iran just had an IFO, initial fiat offering. So in regards to what you said, if you really put it in perspective, where Iran is in some of these countries, especially the way like the global economy is going right now and the slowdown, we have, inflation that's being imported, or not imported, it is sent out away from US and into some of these countries where, basically their currency, local currency, drops against the dollar, and dollar is gaining in strength. And then if you put sanctions on top of that, of these countries, and isolate them from like some of the global trade, then it really creates a disastrous recipe for those countries, and it's hard to really get out of it, especially if you had some issues in the past. So I don't blame some of these countries doing some of these things to preserve their economy and so on, right? Because it's tough. It's even tough for those countries that are not under sanctions and are part of the global trade, and they're struggling because the dollar is rallying against their currency. So, and also at the same time, if you are opening up these Bitcoin as an alternative, and the people don't really believe in the local fiat, especially when they're doing creative stuff like IFOs, and I'm going to continue to mention that. So then you open up a risk of people starting to shift, let's say, to BTC, and then dumping their local currency, which will accelerate the devaluation of that local currency and increase the hyperinflation. But in regards to like working with other countries like Russia and and Asia, yeah, absolutely. That's definitely, I think, something that they're looking to establish, especially if the US is trying to isolate them from the rest of the world. The thing is, it's just that I don't see how Bitcoin could be like a metric of settlements when it comes to like doing global trade, let's say with Russia and China and so on. They'll probably want to use some kind of a stable currency or something like that. I think Bitcoin
Stable to what?
Isn't
that the conversation we're having? That they don't want to use USD?
Oh,
well, they're not allowed to use USD.
Yeah. They're not allowed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So because you see, the thing is, the international settlements, when it comes to commodities, they're settled in USD, and if you're sanctioned by the the bald eagle, then then you're screwed. So all you're doing is just using, let's say, a stablecoin USD. Tether has been actually used quite a bit when it comes to settling oil between Russia and China. That there has been data on that. They were testing it out. So these are all alternatives that they're exploring to kind of go around the system that's in place right now.
Yeah, and I think Dimitri answered most of the question that you just had, which is countries are going to do what they need to do to get around these sanctions and things like that. I will throw in there that X factor of coronavirus and how it's affected China's reputation to the rest of the world. So I wonder how, at this point in this kind of geopolitical landscape, how other countries view China. Like, if something comes down to it, obviously you're going to work, if it's between survival and not working with China, I'm working with China. But right. At this point, I think China's done severe damage to their global reputation. And I think countries are going to be a little bit less likely to maybe work with them on a political side, like kind of this, even like an economic standpoint. But if it does come down to survival, like Dimitri said, they're going to be using this stuff. So I just don't know if China is going to be the first one they go to. So,
yeah.
Interesting. Well, cool. We can move on to Ethereum here. Some other Ethereum news. We've got two stories. I've got the first one. Prague Proof of Work, or Prague POW, is back in the news. We talked about this a little bit, handful of weeks or months ago. Basically, this is really kind of the first point of contention that ETH 2.0 is seeing, and it really doesn't even have that much to do with ETH 2.0. But Prague POW, for those who are not familiar, is basically a group of Ethereum developers or the Ethereum community that thinks as the transition to ETH 2.0 and proof of stake happens, there should be an Ethereum improvement proposal. This one's 1057 that should go into the code that will basically make it impossible for ASIC miners to mine on ETH. And the reason they would want to do this is that if you assume a handful of miners will shut off and kind of move over to the proof of stake setup, and you still have the initial proof of work chain that exists out there, but is being dominated by a handful of ASIC miners, they could potentially collude to launch a brand new fork, create their own ETH 2.0 proof of work, chain. They could even go as far as doing some sort of really deep reorganization of blocks and transactions. So I think there's a real risk that is being, kind of presented or thought about by a lot of these prominent Ethereum developers. But the issue they seem to be running into is that there are quite a few people who don't want to deploy this just out of pure risk of something being corrupted, or really thinking that it's not necessary. So you kind of have these two camps that have gone back and forth. And for a while, over the last few weeks or months, everybody kind of thought that because there was so much upheaval and so much unrest about this Prague POW, that it was kind of thrown aside and everybody forgot about it. But as of a few days ago, it's popped back up on the map and has essentially been kind of successfully not implemented, but it's ready to be activated, assuming the community agrees to it. So it's kind of come out of nowhere, out of left field a little bit now. I think a lot of people are upset at the way governance did or didn't happen around this. And with that being said, those that are pro Prague POW are listening to that the upsetting kind of nature of this, and have basically gone out to say, hey, we're not going to do anything unless we get some sort of full consent or commitment from the community as a whole. Obviously, you don't want to be going into ETH 2.0, be going into this giant change that is going to require a handful of different parties under the ETH ecosystem to work together and have some, very decisive decision occurring. So like I said, it's one of those things that I think everybody forgot about, but there's a proposal out there now, and some other things have happened around this Prague POW, and just as is the case with ETH 2.0 in general, it'll be something we keep everybody posted on. So not necessarily a huge discussion there, but is definitely important for those who are looking at the growth of ETH into ETH 2.0.
Yeah, I keep bringing them up, but one of the conversations we have with Florian was whether ETH 2.0, we would see a fork before ETH 2.0. And I wonder if maybe these people who are pushing are proponents of Prague POW, if that won't be the community that says, hey, look, like this is what we want to do, and we'll see there.
Yeah, or maybe they see something like, do they see some cohort of miners that are ready to fork this and are saying, hey, if we don't implement Prague POW, these miners are going to fork it. The people trying to implement it are trying to avoid the fork. As far as I know, and as far as this has been reported, but it does bring up the point of like, okay, well, if this continues to come to the forefront of the discussion around ETH 2.0, right? Like what are these folks seeing that everybody else maybe isn't? And there's some worry there as to what might be going on behind the scenes.
It'll be interesting to see how Ethereum Classic is going to perform as we get closer to ETH 2.0.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the main point that Florian made was that you can't fork a community, right? Like well, I guess you can if you have one, but you need that community. You can't just fork and instantly create a community out of thin air. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward. That's a good piece of news, Mike. So I have toys to get to here.
Nice.
But we make those jokes anyways. But I wanted to call out Kieran. We got Florian in the chat still commenting along. So we got about 16 people following along. Guys, if you haven't already, maybe if you're first time viewers or listeners into Layer 1, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. If you're not subscribed or if you already have subscribed, please like the channel. It does help other people find Layer 1, as we want to get our names out there, and people need to hear the good word of Layer 1. So we will get on to the rest of Ethereum, which is the rise of these social currencies. I know I've brought this up for a little while now, for the past 2 weeks, as we've seen the kind of rise in these. I would say like they're akin to income share agreements, where someone's kind of paying up front with the possibility of getting paid more later. Income share agreements are like something that has popped up at university or trade school, where someone will go to school for free, and then that school will get paid per percentage of their income at a later date. So obviously these social currencies have popped up. We saw Alex Masmej launch a social currency. We've seen a ton of different ones, but this one, and I'll put it in the chat here, is going to be from a prominent NFT collector called Whale Shark. I'm going to copy the link. I'm going to drop it here. But basically, this social currency is going to be backed by his vault of NFT assets, which is a little bit different than in ISA format that's been thrown out by like Alex Masmej and a couple of these guys that say, hey, front me 20K or front me 30K, and I'll pay you back later at a better rate, or you can also engage with me with these currencies, which some of the Whale Shark token. But anyways, I dropped DeFi rate. This is actually an article written by Cooper Turley, who we had on recently, but it goes down to break down this whale token. So the whale token is going to allow you to take fractional ownership in this vault. The value is a little sketchy, right? Because the guy has bought these different NFTs, whether that's within Crypto Voxels, Gods Unchained. He's essentially the biggest NFT owner in the NFT space right now, in that growing non-fungible token space. And he's made a currency that essentially is backed by all of these NFT assets. Now, the tricky part here is valuing these assets, right? Because he purchased them and then didn't have a secondary buyer that's come in and said, this is what it's worth. He's essentially purchased it himself. Who knows if he underpaid or overpaid or whatnot. So you can't have a value on these assets without that secondary buyer saying this is what it's worth after you buy it initially. So that's kind of the situation here. He's created this currency and it's backed by all of these different, he's got mythic cards from Gods Unchained. He's got center parcels and crypto voxels. He's got 2 Genesis avatars, which is essentially like saying you have Genesis crypto kitties. All of these different NFT pieces that he's created this token to be backed by. Now there are like different utilities for this token, which are interesting. What we saw with like Alex and a couple of these other social currencies, that it's essentially allowing you to take part in this person's success, right? Or allowing you to kind of interact with this person on a more personal basis. So for example, like Alex's token allows you to pay him his own token, which I think he would eventually burn, to actually get like a one-on-one with him, or interact with him, maybe get some consulting from him. So for example, this whale utility says purchase certain NFTs from the vault, his vault. Purchase exclusive NFTs from Whale Shark's partners, rent digital real estate owned by Whale Shark, receive consultation from Whale Shark at a rate of 1 whale per minute. So these are all different utilities for these tokens. Maybe it's for regulation, maybe it's not, but I do like the social interaction piece. I don't know so much about NFT assets in a currency backed by them. I think we're at too early of a point and stage to actually have any sort of value attached, any sort of like stable value attached to these NFT assets and have a currency traded. But I figured I'd throw this your guys' way and show you guys kind of the evolution of these social currencies and what's happening within Ethereum and what essentially having these smart contracts allows you to do.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the difference here compared to like maybe the Alex token is that there's actually collateral there, the NFTs. But the problem is that nobody really knows what the value of that collateral is. So it is kind of different in that sense that there's actually assets that he's pinning against it. I would wonder if that if the people that buy the token would be able to actually get some of that, and if some of the NFTs that he has, by recovering that collateral from him, later on. That would be an interesting thing to do. I like the point that you mentioned that if he has like some land, right, that you can rent. He can rent it to you if you hold in that token. That's pretty interesting. If the activity picks up in the virtual world, if you can rent that facility and do some creative with it to make money, that could be profitable too.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like, like you said, Q, as far as the utility goes, you can purchase certain NFTs from the vault, purchase some of these exclusive NFTs from some of what will be his partners. And then, like you said, Deem, rent this kind of digital real estate. I like the concept of this. This is almost kind of like a basket of NFTs. I think it's going to be super key that if, one of these NFTs or two of them kind of boom, that's going to be obviously reflected in the in the whale price, right? Otherwise, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't I just hold these NFTs myself? And as we, we've got some interesting things happening with NFTs and how you can sell them. Like we talked about, we've got a podcast we're recording tomorrow with OpenSea, so we'll definitely be asking them a lot about that. If you're interested in the NFT space, that'll be a great podcast on that front. But the other side of this too is that you have to be careful anytime somebody is issuing these new tokens and kind of pre-mining them, especially the human tokens, right? I tweeted about how a lot of times this offering can be corrupted and we saw the same thing with IEOs, when a small portion of the tokens are issued at some sort of quote unquote fixed price or some publicly traded price, that then inflates over time the value of those other tokens that are being held by that person who's issuing the human offering. So the more that happens, the more risk I think ETH and kind of this niche running into another kind of ICO boom where you sell 5 or 10 or 15 or 20% of your tokens to the public, and those tokens come out to have some, $1 million valuation. And if you hold the other 80% of tokens, you now all of a sudden have $4 million that you can, slowly sell off to other speculators, to other buyers in the market. And end of the day, if you borrowed, 30K or 100K, it's pretty easy to get that amount of money back plus many millions more, and kind of game the system that way. So it's just something that we've obviously seen before, and ICOs did that unfortunately, but something to be, at least on my side, kind of wary of.
I think it's important to understand this for everyone because if that does occur, where a lot of these will fall through and get dumped on, then people are going to start saying it's like a scam and whatnot, right? So, but hey, listen, you do your own research, you figure out, like, here's the deal, here's what restrictions are in place, if there are any, for that person to sell and so on, right? So you have to understand all these things. But sometimes, people get blinded by the greed and they want to speculate and they don't care about the details and so on. And then they'll be very quick to jump the gun and go on social media and say how they got scammed. But really, they just didn't do their own research. So, I agree with Mike, that's, you have to really do your own due diligence there.
Yeah, I think it's funny, these people on social media that are like ETH maxis and they're talking about kind of like shitty ICOs and things like that. And the ICO is kind of like bullshit, and these social currencies are just another form of that. And it like, didn't Ethereum have an ICO? Isn't all of this based on the success of that ICO and how they went going forward and used those funds and created this entire ecosystem that we're even talking about now? So there was probably a 99% chance that it was going to be a scam, but the 1% still here making the world a little bit better. So, I think fair points on all the above. The overriding story here is like this whale shark guy, like creating an entire ecosystem himself. I mean, he's buying and selling these NFTs, and creating these markets all by himself, right? Obviously he's a whale. And if he buys these items, even of a maybe like a smaller scale like project that doesn't have much notice, and then he goes in and buys something for 50K, he's almost created a market himself. He's created advertising and marketing for that project. He's essentially like driving this NFT marketplace forward, just through all of the. I mean, he has 2,800 different NFTs, 2,900 different NFTs in this vault. So. he's one of the major movers in a market that we're starting to see pick up. It'll be interesting to see going forward. But
sounds like he's cornering the market.
Hey, and we'll see if it pays off for him and the holders of whale token here. I think a centralized or a less I guess a less risky application can be created for this, but I like the idea of social currencies giving people access to people they follow. But it doesn't mean that you have to create a whole NFT backed token and all these things. You could do that probably with just some other type of application that not as inherently risky as buying into somebody's token. But anyways, that's about it for Ethereum. I'm gonna move the arrow here, and as we get to talk about EOS, I think does anybody want to read off Kieran's chat here? As we've got about 15, 16 people in the chat. Appreciate you guys following along. But Kieran said something about the block that actually was mined as the halving block.
Yeah, it looks like in this block, 629,999 is something that says. And this is, alluding to what the Genesis block said. It says New York Times, April 9th, 2020, with $2.3 trillion injection. Fed's plan far exceeds 2008 rescue mined. So I don't know. It looks like maybe the core devs, threw in this, alluding to what was a quote from a newspaper around this time in 2008, I think it was, or 2009, when it was something, from the UK saying Chancellor on the brink of bailout. So, kind of playing with it there. Definitely a piece of history. So if you were able to witness that with us or anywhere else, congrats. Pretty awesome to see that they're kind of keeping that alive and rolling.
Yeah, that ode to the Genesis block is pretty badass, man. That's awesome. I actually, when he put that in the chat, I definitely liked that a lot. He said the mining pool inserted into the block, so it looks like something that was put in there by the F2 pool that mined the actual block.
Nice, very cool.
Cool. So we'll finish up with EOS here. I think we're at an hour and 30 minutes, so we're coming up kind of. I think we're gonna be around our average of Layer1Live. We've got Brendan Blumer tweeting about BlockOne's involvement in EOS. So something that has been kind of a topic within the EOS community here over the past, I would say, 6 months, as we've seen kind of Ethereum make these progressions, mostly Ethereum, but there's definitely been some other smart contract platforms that have come out and are starting to make EOS a little bit worried, or at least the community within EOS, and hoping that BlockOne would maybe take more of an active role in EOS itself, not just the technology EOS.io that can be used by enterprises and things like that. They want to see EOS step in that Vitalik Buterin role and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to go forward, being that face of the franchise that we always talk about here. But Brendan, in kind of a bullish or a bearish case, a Ukrainian bearish case here, is talking pretty negatively here, at least from my perspective. He says EOS is the first major public network to be launched with EOS.io software, and it has quickly become one of the largest DApp ecosystems globally. So we take our involvement seriously because the stakes are high. But he goes on to say something that, and I want to point out one thing. He says, while we continue to advance EOS.io through R&D, developer feedback, and our own application, we believe it is what BlockOne doesn't do for EOS that makes it so revolutionary. We've seen some of these DAOs, like MakerDAO, for example. The founders behind these DAOs, I think, are taking a involuntary role, or kind of like what word am I looking for here? Maybe they're stepping back and saying, we need the community to handle this, right? And I think that's the wrong way to approach something so nascent and at such an early stage, because even EOS, I would say, is 2 years old at this point. He goes on to say, let's see, I want to make sure that I don't quote his entire thread, because it is a big thread. I'll link it here.
I wonder if it had to do anything with the legal side too.
It definitely does. You know, EOS has definitely taken a very, very cautious approach in every single thing that they do, from like a active role within EOS and how that reflects to the SEC. Let's see. There's an enormous set of considerations that must go into everything we do and trade-offs that we must choose between. So there you go, Dima. That said, through our public blockchain engagement team, we are actively working on our first steps in voting and the subsequent plans related to our engagement. So, I mean, he caps it off here with like a really good message saying we're all in this together, yada, yada, yada. But just from like a general feel of what he's trying to say through this tweet thread, I'm not bullish on BlockOne's, I guess, idea of their engagement in EOS. I wish they would take a more active role, especially when we see more smart contract platforms start to take prominence. Ethereum by itself, but other smart I mean, Solana's here making a lot of news. We've got Cosmos. We've got what other smart contract platforms? Polkadot's a huge one, right? You got Gavin Wood front and center talking about what they're going to do. So I think people want EOS to be not taken over, but at least have a face of the franchise here, hoping that was Brendan Blumer, but it looks like they don't want to step out there and potentially get themselves mixed up with the SEC.
No, obviously you've been following EOS for a long time, right? All the way back to the ICOA days and still have EOS. What is it going to take for you to move on from the EOS ecosystem if BlockOne kind of continues to just, twiddle their thumbs and not do much?
It's not going to, I mean, I don't want to like say anything live, right? People front running my trades. I would like to see, one of the comments that's further down that thread is just, and I think it's just from some random EOS community guy. And he's like, hey, listen, all we want from you is like, put out some applications that are user friendly, right? That we can attract this user base that possibly lives on Ethereum, but this developer base that we need. I just want to see BlockOne kind of come forward and help in that regard. How are they gaining more users to EOS? Not just EOS.io. How they're looking at it from like a 2, 3, 4 year play, which I understand, right? But they've got the bag, and there's a lot of people out here that are holding like actual bags. So I guess it wouldn't take much, man, to be honest. I wish EOS would take a more active role. 1-2's in the chat saying, EOS, we don't need BlockOne. I would say, like, it's tough, man. The EOS community's road is a little bit easier if you have that BlockOne taking an active role. Certainly, we can look at it in like a 3 or 4 year time span, but who knows what happens in that time with tech, with crypto, with blockchain. I'm bullish on EOS long term, man. I think as long as BlockOne stays like at least somewhat involved. But
what if you compare, let's say, EOS and the way they're approaching this, with BlockOne not getting involved, and compare that to, like, let's say ETH, right, where you have the foundation there and you have Vitalik, right?
Exactly.
Where they're they're fully on board and trying to maximize everything. So it's just kind of looking at the success that ETH has had in attracting developers and having things develop on there, and in looking at EOS, where they're doing a little bit differently in a way where BlockOne is not getting involved, right? But that essentially kind of undermines the progress and development, right? And on all these things that are happening. So I think the legal side is definitely makes sense. But it's, if you compare it to ETH that has had success in attracting the community and so on, right? Mm-hmm. They're doing things differently, right?
And I think go ahead, Mike.
They can afford to in a lot of ways, because while they did run an ICO, because of the way that they went about that ICO and the way that they've kind of decentralized themselves, I think they've gotten the pass from regulators. So they've been able to do more with the community and the ecosystem, because they don't necessarily have to worry about some action that they take coming back to bite them. And back in the day, whenever EOS was they were raising all this money, and the people kind of on the other side of the fence in the traditional financial space or lawyers, right? Like I heard from them time and time again that the way that a lot of these ICOs are being carried out, yeah, they're raising a lot of money, but it's going to end in disaster, and if, to me, like the way I look at BlockOne is they're either not doing things because they don't think those things will pan out and be a return on some investment, or they're not doing things because of some legal concern. And I think it's fair to say that it's that legal concern that they're worried about. But the longer that goes on, does the chance that they look at EOS.io and the EOS ecosystem as, really a separate entity from really every aspect, other than the fact that they raised all this money for EOS, how long does it take before they look at EOS and say, you know what, there's really no resolution here. We've got all this money, let's deploy it on something other than EOS, right? And I think that's the real risk, is if BlockOne can't figure out this legal piece and they continue to go back and forth with their lawyers, and now they're sitting on, $2 billion instead of $3 billion or something. And they're like, listen, we got to really, we got to really put this to use somewhere else if we expect to kind of make any money on it.
I completely agree with that, man. I think the worry from the EOS community comes from the fact that, like in the chat, they're saying Kieran's dropping near protocol, Cosmos, Solana, Cardano. The Ethereum competitor thing is played out, man. Like, you don't need to be an Ethereum competitor. Ethereum's not like gonna be going anywhere. The thing is, you don't want to be 8th down that list. It was fine being maybe 2, 3, 4 on that ranking chart of users, but once you get down and you start seeing these other up-and-comers that are essentially EOS competitors at this point, everyone else is racing behind Ethereum. And I think over the last 6 months, with these smart contract platforms starting to launch, starting to push initiatives from a team or a foundation, like Dimitri was saying, then EOS is like looking around. It's like, come on, guys! Like you got some billions of dollars. Put it into DeFi on EOS. Put it into some application on EOS. You're saying voice, but voice isn't launching till 2021, and it's this huge, like, we're gonna compete with, Medium or Facebook. It's like, dude, just put money into things that work on the blockchain, and that's what we want to see. Put money into a developer coming from Ethereum doing what they did with DeFi and put it into an application on EOS, and that's what we want to see. It doesn't have to be, this multi-year process. It's like, I always go back to what Dimitri's saying again. It's like, this thing is built as we go. Like, it's nothing that needs to be perfected and launched in 2022. It's get DeFi people on EOS right now and have them start iterating on it. Like,
I mean, they clearly must not be able to, right? Because why wouldn't you at this point? It's been 2-3 years.
Yeah, again, this is the conversation we're having. It's like, well, why aren't they doing this? They got good people who are with, like, running their finances are actually doing it really well. I think I've had certain chats. I don't know the actual details, but from what I know, whoever's managing those assets is doing a great job of maintaining and not putting that, not pulling like a Galaxy Digital where they're down 40% on the year. So it's just EOS VC even, man, the funding that we're about to get into, it's not even clear, and I'll move on to it. They're investing, EOS VC fund invested in game studio Dazzle Rocks. This is just kind of a like open world MMO, kind of like in the same fashion as Sandbox, where you have kind of a crypto voxel look to it, or a voxel look to it, and you have an MMO. They raised, I believe, I'm caught up in that story.
Almost 7 million.
Yeah, 7 million from Galaxy EOS VC fund. So my point being, like, it doesn't even go into how this is going to be like running on EOS, like the actual ecosystem. So it's like, okay, EOS VC fund, are they actually investing in projects that are going to launch on EOS? Or are they just funding products that are like launching digitally? It's a big conversation, man, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole.
I hate to bring this up, but it could be worse. It could be a situation with the Ripple and XRP, or BlockOne just comes out and is like saying, "Hey, listen, EOS is one thing. BlockOne, we're a different thing. We're making our stuff by ourselves. They're dumping EOS to get that money. And that's what everybody's kind of afraid of. But that's obviously not the case for EOS, or at least yet. But it obviously could be worse. And you want to see how when Voice was coming out, for first thing that everybody started asking is like, well, how is that going to interact with EOS? And they don't really have an answer yet. So. And that uncertainty and all these things that you're mentioning, where they're doing investments and it's not really interacting with EOS, then it's like, well, I thought that was the whole reason why we got into EOS, is because this is the reason why we put investors put money into EOS to fund them to create all these things and then translate into the value for EOS, right? And it sucks to see that it's different. And then like, okay, so, and then let's say you have these companies that start creating these products and so on, and that revenue that they're going to be getting, right, is that going to go to the EOS holders, or is that going to go to the people that running this entity? So it's like, we've seen that so many times in crypto.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, right? Is like we're not necessarily picking on EOS here, but EOS is kind of an example of every other ETH competitor, new or old. This is what this is an example that they're struggling with. I think the majority of them struggle with just interest in a user base. Maybe they did run an ICO back in the day and they've got some people who are still holding bags and that's kind of their community, or, they didn't run an ICO and they did things in a regulated way or privately, but then they don't have a community. So it's, it's kind of this battle of attrition with funds. And okay, we're going to spend all this money on marketing or spend all this money on internal applications or development or whatnot. But the elephant in the room constantly for every one of these folks is that ETH has not only, been able to raise significant amounts of money and put together this giant financial ecosystem for ETH and all the things that go on alongside ETH, but they've been able to build the developer base as well, simply maybe because organically, because they've been around the longest and, they've had some pretty dire issues, but have responded well. And now I think are at a point where they have such a lead over kind of the smart contract wars that any new DeFi focused app or any new stable coin, or even to some degree when it comes to gaming, right? There's not enough incentive that these other protocols can throw at them to compete with just the natural organic incentive of launching your DeFi app on ETH when there's already this giant DeFi ecosystem that you could plug into. Why would I be the first through the door and be the very first DeFi app on Solana or, ABC, right? To name it, right? When I get so many benefits just from choosing ETH.
Yeah, it's that idea of composability, and I love that term. I don't know who we got it from on an interview, but the idea that you could, when you're building on Ethereum, you're essentially interacting with all of the things already built on Ethereum, and that idea of composability, and that you can go from, with a MetaMask wallet, so many different aspects of blockchain in general, right? You can go from DeFi to gaming to ICOs to so many different things within Ethereum that you don't actually need to leave that community at all. So that almost seems like a snowball that gets pushed downhill, right? Like if you have all these things, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now people are like, oh, I want to build over there. So it only gets worse and worse for the others outside of it. Yeah, I guess I would like to see BlockOne just, like, let's see more BlockOne June, man. Like, let's see BlockOne June when they first announced Voice. That was a cool event, man. I didn't get to go, but it looked like the community was kind of rallying around those type of things. So do more hackathons, do more events like BlockOne June. Get the hype around the EOS ecosystem to a level where people are actually paying attention. Certainly I would love a decentralized, like just run by the community type of ecosystem, which EOS Nation is a great example of a great like flag bearer for that this community. But it's not enough. We're not big enough to be doing things like that. So I certainly love EOS. I think like the community within EOS is really good. It's just not big enough. I will always be around for EOS no matter what the price is until maybe years from now. Even if I do end up selling my tokens on EOS XF, I'll always keep a little small bag to interact with the community and things like that. But I would love to see more like interaction from BlockOne. Great discussion. I appreciate you guys taking part. I know you don't own EOS bags yourself, but you're always but it's always good to hear from you two, as well as kind of the community here that's really talking about EOS right here. Let's see.
I think we got one dislike here as I started comparing EOS to XRP. So sorry about that, guys.
We always get one, dude. I want to meet the guys that dislike. Oh, we got 2 dislikes.
Yeah, that's
now.
what I'm saying.
Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
Not liking our EOS talk here. I think
we're hitting you with some honesty on Monday.
Yeah.
It's important to see both sides. You know, we can be shilling EOS all day, but I think it's important to look at the negative aspects. And Brendan's comments weren't too positive for their involvement with the EOS ecosystem. Crypto Pickle said they did say they are announcing a new product soon. I believe they said they're not doing a BlockOne June, but they're announcing some product for 2021. So should be interesting to see.
Definitely. Nice. Well, I think that's what we've got for this episode. Obviously, the halving is over with, so we'll kind of see where things go here this week. What other big news are we going to get? You know, what's kind of the next big story. But as always, you know, we'll keep you guys posted. We're here every Monday. Got some good interviews coming up this week. But yeah, anything else, guys?
Tomorrow, tune in. Dimitri's desk. We're gonna cover the volatility in the market. Obviously, things are happening. So be exciting to cover where I stand post this halving move.
Yeah, we're looking for the bottom calls, Dimitri. We're looking for bottom calls. We appreciate everybody, following along. Like Mike said, we've got OpenSea this week. We've got Status this week, and then we have, I believe, BlockFi on 520. So those are our next 3 interview episodes. We do Layer1Live every Monday, usually at 1. We changed it for the halving today, which we appreciate you guys following along. Thank you so much for your support. If you're in the Telegram channel, expect an update here in like the next 2 hours. Some messages from us. Thank you so much for following along, guys. It's been an amazing ride. We're looking forward to everything going forward too. Awesome.
Boom.